Okay, we're continuing with attribute selectors, okay, on page 168. Selectors can also be defined based on attributes and attribute values associated with elements. Two attributes, ID and class, are often key in targeting styles to a specific element or group of elements. Recall that the ID attribute is used to identify specific elements within the web page. To apply a style to an element based on its ID, you use the selector #ID, where ID is the value of the ID attribute. Thus, to format text of the H1 heading, be H1 ID equals main. Okay, to appear in red, you could also apply the following style rule. #main is the ID name, color red. Because no two elements can share the same ID value, HTML uses the class attribute to identify groups of elements that share a similar characteristic or property. The attribute has the syntax shown there, where class name is the name of the element class. For example, the following H1 heading and paragraph both belong to the intro class of elements. Okay, H1 class equals intro. Okay, there's a p tag, class equals intro. Okay, and then you can see the tip there. A style rule involving an ID selector has precedence over any rule except those defined within an inline style. Okay, again, inline is more specific, so that takes precedence. One reason to use the class attribute is to assign the same style to multiple elements that belong to the same class. A selector based on a class has this form shown there, where class is the name of the class and styles are styles associated with that class of element. Thus, to display the text of all elements belonging to the intro class in blue, you could apply the following style. Intro, since it's a class, color blue. Because different types of elements can belong to the same class, you can also specify exactly which kinds of elements within the class receive the rule by using the selector shown there. And you can see the tip there, by the way. You can associate a single element with several classes by listing each class name separated by a space as part of the class attribute value. So, and now we're at the top of page 169. You know, the h1.intro, which would be all h1 tags within the intro class. So while ID and class are the most common attributes to use with selectors, any attribute or attribute value can be the basis for a selector. And you can see down below they give you the selector, the description, an example of it, okay, and how it matches. Okay, all current browsers support the attribute selector patterns listed in figure 323. Be aware, however, that some older browsers, primarily Internet Explorer 6, may not support these selectors in your style sheets. So, okay. In Sunny Acres homepage, Tammy has added the following class attribute to the last paragraph that introduces the website. She's got a closing class, okay, and she suggests that you format this paragraph so that it appears in green and is right aligned on the page. To do this, you'll add the following to the SA Styles sheet. Okay, section p.closing, which is paragraph tag in the closing class, will have that color and will align to the right. Okay, note that this style rule applies to paragraphs belonging to the closing class and nested within the section element. Okay, we just talked about that. So let's go ahead and go to the style sheet. Here it is. We're going to add the following rule at the bottom of the style sheet. Okay, so after the H2 tag, I'll hit enter a couple times, and now we're going to add a comment in here, /* section styles, / enter section p closing, again p tag in the closing class, and now the curly bracket, enter, and I'm going to space over. The color of that will be RGB parenthesis 0, space 165 comma, space, 0, semicolon, enter, and then text align. And then the closing curly bracket. And save. And let's see what happens here on the home page. Okay, in this section, we're looking here in this section. Okay, now what would help here is if we actually saw the code too for the home. So I'm going to right click on the home and open with Notepad. So you can see this paragraph is right here. Okay, so let's find it in the code. We know it's got to be in the section element. Okay, but it should have a class associated with its paragraph, and it does right there. And so that's how we specify how to format text. Now we've got styling web page text. Okay, the text align property. Okay, so you can see there's the class named closing right there for this paragraph, and that's why in this style sheet, this takes precedence. It's more specific to the section element, the paragraph tag, in the class named closing. Okay, so page 171, the text align property you used in your style rule to align the contents of the closing paragraph is an example of text style. In this section, you'll explore other CSS styles used to format the appearance of web page text. Tammy has noticed that all of the text in her sample pages is displayed in the same typeface or font. She'd like to see more variety in how the web page's text is rendered. The default font used by most browsers is Times New Roman, but you can specify a different font for any page element using the property font family : where fonts. A specific font is a font that is identified by name, such as Times New Roman or Helvetica. When referenced by font family property, a specific font refers to a font definition that is stored on a user's computer. A generic font describes the general appearance of a typeface, but does not rely on a specific font definition. CSS supports the following generic font groups: serif, sans serif, monospace, cursive, and fancy. When you use generic fonts, you have no control over which font a user's browsers will choose for the web page. Therefore, the common practice is to list specific fonts first in order of preference and end with the list with a generic font. If a user's browser cannot find any of the specific fonts listed, it uses a generic font of its own. For example, the style font family : Arial Black, Gadget, sans serif tells a browser to use the Arial Black font if available. If not, to look for the Gadget font, and if neither are available, to use a generic sans serif font of its own selection. Note that font names contain only one or more blank spaces, such as Arial Black, must be enclosed within single or double quotes if they have a space in them. So now page 172, you can see because the available fonts vary with each user's operating system, the challenge is to choose a list of fonts known as web-safe fonts, which will display in most the same way in all browsers. And you can see there's a list of them. A general rule for printing is to use sans serif fonts for headlines and serif fonts for body text. For computer monitors, which have lower resolution than printed material, the general rule is to use sans serif fonts for headlines and body text, leaving serif fonts for special effects and large text. Okay, and there's some more references there. Top page 173, Tammy expects that her web page will be viewed only on computer monitors, so you'll use a sans serif font for all the body text by adding the new style, font family Verdana, Geneva, sans serif to the body selector. Browsers will first try to load the Verdana font, followed by the Geneva font. If both are unavailable, browsers will load a generic sans serif font. So we're going to come over here to the essay styles right here. Top of the style sheet, add the following to the top. So comment, or wait, Wrong place. Right here. Body. Under background white, we're going to specify our font. Font hyphen family, colon, space, Verdana, comma, Geneva, comma, sans serif. Which sans means without. And if you look at Times New Roman font, like right down here, see how it's got the little extra decorative ends on the font? That's a serif font with the extras. That's Times New Roman. When you use sans serif, that drops the extra decorative stuff, and so that's more like Arial, where the lines are straight without the decorative style. So let's go ahead and do Control S, and let's see what happens here on the page. See, this is, and again, I was just pointing this out down here, this is a sans serif where it loses the extra decorative ends for the font, and it's just all straight line text. And we look like page 173. So now we're all the way over to page 174, setting the font size. Okay, talks about with a unit of measurement as a percentage of the size of the content with a keyword. Okay, you can see there, read page 174. You can see where they have the EM. Which is the exact meaning of the M unit, depends on its use in the style sheet. If the M unit is used for setting font size, it expresses the size relative to the font size of the parent element. Okay, so for an H1 heading, the parent element is the web page body. That's the rule. That rule sets the font size of H1 heading to twice the font size of the body. Okay, or you can use a percent. They talk about different ways to say it. So let's go here to our style sheet. I'm going to add to the H1 headings for the section element. So here's section, H1 section. Immediately below the color, we're going to specify size, font hyphen size, colon space 1.7 EM semicolon. For the section element. Okay, so Control S to save. And this was in the H1. It should be these right here. Let's see what happens. Or no, in the section one right here. So it says H1 heading appears slightly smaller under the revised style sheet. So